Hey, seventh grade. It's nice to be back with you again today. We are going to do a new video on the next part of chapter 17. This is, as you see on here, part 3, big letter B. Okay? So you should have your notes. If you don't, you might want to pause this video and go get the notes off of your Google Classroom. Make sure you've got them in front of you because I'm going to talk pretty fast through them. You notice that my background is different. I have moved into my office upstairs. I got it cleaned up a little bit and we are ready to go. So anyway, let me see if I can change the screen over to, there we go. There we go. All right. So we're ready. Again, use the pause button and pause if I go too fast because I'm just trying to get these done. I don't like to have videos that are longer than 15 minutes because if I do, then you guys get distracted and I get bored staring at a green dot. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about where we were. We had just talked about the end of World War I and all of the big dictators that came into play at the end of World War I. We had Stalin in Russia, who brought communism to Russia. Then we had the two in Italy and Germany, and we know who they are, but I'm hoping that you're saying them in your head right now before I say them out loud. In Germany, we know that was Hitler. Hitler came to power around 1933 or 31 or 33 in Germany, and we talked about that in the last video. Why in the world did the people elect him? But he told people what they wanted to hear. All right, the other one was Mussolini in Italy, and we talked about all three of those. We're going to look a little bit now at what else is going on in this interim period between the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II. Okay, so one of the things that came out of World War I was the desire for a League of Nations. Now, this was Woodrow Wilson's idea. Woodrow Wilson was the United States president. He was a good man. But what he wanted above all things was he just wanted everybody to get along. He didn't like fighting. He didn't like arguing, disagreeing. He just wanted everybody to get along. So he thought the League of Nations would solve all of his problems and that he would, the whole world would just, we'd all get along in peace and harmony and everything would be delightful. The problem is that at this point, he's in the beginning-ish of his second term as president, and he's lost control of Congress. He's a Democrat, and there are more Republicans in Congress, I believe that's the way it is, than there are Democrats. I'm not positive of that party affiliation. I may have it backwards, but anyway, the United States Senate is not overly crazy about Woodrow Wilson right now, and they refuse to ratify the treaty. They never approve it. They don't think the United States needs to join the League of Nations. The United States needs to just back out and let the rest of Europe do its thing and they can worry about their own problems. But we are not going to get involved. That was their philosophy. And sure enough, the League of Nations, as it was created by the European powers, was too weak and ineffective to have any great influence in the world. They had no standing army, no ability to enforce any laws or anything that they put forward. They had nothing. So it was really more of a waste of time than anything else. It was really, a lot of people thought it was an early attempt to form a one world government. And that scared people. And it should scare us because that's one of the things that the Bible talks about in the book of Revelations that the Antichrist will do. So that's why a lot of people were afraid of it. Okay, but in the process of forming that League of Nations, Americans and other nations signed a bunch of disarmament and non-aggression pacts. Those are big words. Do we know what they mean? Disarmament means to disarm, to take away the weapons, okay? Take away weapons. Non-aggression means not aggressive. Okay, so if we're aggressive, we're pushy. And this is meaning that we're going to step back and not be so pushy. So the first of these 3 different types was the Washington Naval Conference. This was held in Washington, D.C. and it put limits on the number of warships and other military equipment that nations could have. Several different nations took part in this. The United States was one of them. And basically what it said was, if we limit our number of warships to 5, then Britain can also have 5, and Japan can have maybe 2 or 3. Okay? Just limiting the number of warships. It worked a little bit, but there were several places where these nations could not agree. So they never really got very far in the Washington Naval Conference. The second one is the Locarno Pact. This was between these 3 nations, Germany, France, and Belgium. And it was establishing the borders and saying that we are going to live with these borders. We know that Germany wants more, but we are willing to live with these borders. We are not going to go run out and try to conquer our neighbors. We're going to stick within our borders. Now, it's interesting to me that Germany signed this Locarno Pact, and then really within about 5 years of signing it, they're going to push their way into some of their other neighbors, not France and Belgium, but some of the other neighbors that they have on other sides of them. They will push their way through Belgium again in 1939. So it's not going to last that long. Then we have the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Sounds like a cereal, I know. But Kellogg was the name of the guy who was actually the U.S. Secretary of State. Our Secretary of State here in the United States is the person who is most influential for the president to listen to about foreign affairs, about things going on in other countries around the world. So he negotiates treaties on behalf of our government. So Mr. Kellogg was the leader of this, he was the Secretary of State at this time in history, and he put forth this pact and had many nations signed it to use negotiation rather than force. Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? And then we can all get along and we don't have to fight. But that is not the way it worked. What basically the Kellogg-Briand Pact did was it made war illegal. And you see, we still have war here 100 years later. We still have regular wars. So obviously it didn't really work either. Okay. So those are the 3 types of disarmament or non-aggression pacts that went out at this time. Next, we're going to look at China and Japan. Okay. China is in the middle of a big struggle for power led by a couple of different men. China has had the Qing dynasty in place for hundreds of years. And as the Qing dynasty starts to weaken, Sun Yat-sen is leading a group of Chinese military and students in trying to take control away from one family, which is what the Qing dynasty was, to letting all of China have a say in how they're governed. So Sun Yat-sen is leading what is basically a nationalistic movement to give control of China's government to the Chinese. He led the Kuomintang Party. It's a big word, but it basically means a nationalist party. Okay? When he died in 1925, and one of the young officers took over for him. His name was Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek. And Chiang Kai-shek came from just a regular old everyday family, kind of like you and me do. And he led China in its struggle for independence from dynastic leadership, from the leadership of one family. The problem is, excuse me, at the same time, another man, Mao Zedong, also was struggling for control of China, but he was struggling to get control of it for the communists. Communism had already taken over in Russia, and he wanted to bring communism to China. So they're fighting each other. Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong both have forces. They both have governments. They're leading the cause for what they believe China needs next as far as government. Japan is going to invade them in 1931. That's what I said here. Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong fight a civil war, a war among the Chinese people to gain control of China. It will be interrupted by the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, which is one of the areas of China, in 1931. When the Japanese invade Manchuria, the Chinese forces will unite. Both Chiang Kai-shek's and Mao Zedong's, they'll unite, and they'll both attack their enemy. It goes back to that illustration we've used before of, I can attack my brother, but you can't. Okay? If you come after my brother, then my brother and I are going to unite and attack you. You know what this is like. This is sibling rivalry. Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong are going to unite their forces to attack the Japanese. And it's going to take both of them. They actually are not going to be successful, and China will fall to the Japanese for a portion of World War II. Okay, so what is going on in Japan? They are seeing the rise of militarism, that idea of an increasingly strong military. We need more and more military forces. Excuse me. They used this militarism as a form of fascism. Remember, fascism is what we studied in Italy and Germany. The idea of being very, very proud of your country and wanting your country to be the best in the world, that is part of this Japanese militarism. But the problem is that Japan, as small as it is in that little island, needed more natural resources. So they have a growing appetite for foreign territories where they can get more natural resources. They don't have any good source of oil, so if they're going to grow a military, they need a good source of oil. They need other natural resources as well. So during this time, we're going to go into Africa. So that's all of Japan. All right, so the mandate system and colonial rule, I need to explain this. The mandate system happened in Africa after World War I, when the territories of Germany were divided up among other countries. The League of Nations took control of all of Germany's territories, took them away from German control, and gave them to other countries to control, while they built governments in those countries for those countries to eventually be independent. Okay, so this is primarily, most of these countries are going to go to the control of Britain and France, but there are some exceptions to that. But Britain is going to take control of some areas. France is going to take control of some. South Africa actually takes at least one. And they're going to build in these nations a good, stable government, and then let them have their independence. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. All right, in the Middle East, this happens as well. It's called, these nations are put forth. We have Pan-Arabism and the Balfour Declaration. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration authorized the British to administer Palestine. And Palestine will eventually become the nation of Israel. Okay, but right now it's just Balfour Declaration. It authorized the British to administer Palestine. Okay? All right, I'm going to stop the recording and publish this, and I'll give you a little quiz over what you've learned.